Don't worry, you can still listen to that. And this that we're doing today is still going to be applicable regardless. It can be standalone in many ways. But what I learned from you guys is many of you are quick to adapt to change. Like, change is not a big deal for you. You're on it. You're able to change. You're able to move and maneuver. But that's not always the case for everyone. And in a time like this, it's really important for us to be ready to be with people in the midst of change. So a couple of weeks ago, one of my closest friends and colleagues that I work with in Kentucky sent me a text message and said 1,000 employees, or maybe more than that, are being let go. My team is down to 4 people. So-and-so lost their job. I mean, just like big stuff. And so she's texting me this and I'm thinking, I need to call her. And so I was like, can we talk and just walk? And so I took a walk and I talked to her and I listened to her, and I didn't really have much to say. All the people around her have been losing their jobs. She went from 16 employees since she started 6 years ago to 4, still wanting to do important work, but just feeling overwhelmed by that. And so I simply asked her, I said, what is it that I can do to support you right now? And she paused and she said, just asking that question helps take some of the weight off of my shoulders right now. So it's amazing what just listening and asking the question can do in the midst of these really, really challenging times of change for all of us. And so that's part of what we're going to talk about today, is how we can really support our partners. So let me click to the next one. So the first thing I'm going to encourage us all to do is pay attention. And in your worksheet, you'll have kind of that piece. But when we're experiencing change, it's important for us to realize other people are too. And we all react to things differently. And as we move to supporting ourselves, or supporting others, we need to know ourselves, but then really pay attention to others. And I'll give you guys some practical strategies on what that looks like. And also be careful that you don't move too fast beyond somebody else's change. So if you're real comfortable with change, not everybody's going to be. So be cautious that you don't just scurry along, if you will, or move along saying, okay, we're good. Everybody good? All right, let's go, without pausing first. And so one of the quotes that we'll talk about is choosing courage over comfort. Brené Brown, for those of you who know her, and I'll kind of mention this in other places, this is where it's really important for us to pay attention, and we'll choose that in places. So one of my favorite books and favorite quotes and things that I try to apply myself: seek first to understand, then be understood. How many of you all, I'd love to see in the chat, are familiar with the Stephen Covey 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Is this something that you're like, yep, got it, been there? Or yeah, just chime in it on the chat. Excellent. Excellent. So you know this. So knowing it and doing it can be 2 different things sometimes, as we know. But thank you for chiming in. So what does this mean? First of all, it's actively listening to understand and preparing your response. Whew, that is hard. Rather than agreeing or disagreeing, focus on fully and deeply understanding somebody. Demonstrate consideration. Remain curious. And be courageous. Whew. So, you know, an example of this that happened to me just recently is I was a part of a video kind of webinar meeting, and we were discussing something that I thought everybody agreed with, and that this was kind of old news. And so as we're moving forward, one of the people on the call said, I'm not getting you. That's not where I am. I'm like, really? Okay. So tell me more. Really? And so I kept trying to understand, and they recorded the video. And later somebody else watching the video was like, you looked really confused. I was like, I was, and I was trying to understand. Sometimes we have to pause. And at that moment, I kept repeating to myself, seek first to understand, then be understood. So just really try to understand where this person was coming from. We ended up coming up with an understanding, but whew, it took a while. And sometimes that's going to be the case, that it's going to take us some time to really understand. But that taking that stand to understand first and then be understood is super powerful, and builds on, at least I got to hear part of Ashley's conversation from just a few minutes ago. Critically important if we're going to address health inequities is we really need to seek first to understand, then be understood. So this can apply in many situations. One of my favorite quotes as I was preparing this, that is in the Dare to Lead book from Brené Brown, and I mentioned this throughout, and you'll see some of this, is listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. Ooh. That is really a lot to think about. I mean, and that's hard. Like, because we really want to be heard. Even if we say, yeah, we're listening, we still want to be heard. So, a challenge to all of us, including myself, is when we pay attention and listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard, that is a way we can support our partners in adapting to change. And, there's another piece that is from this same book, but the idea is transform always knowing to always learning. Another interesting thing to think about. But anyway, so as we move forward, paying attention, listening. And the next piece of that is understanding the challenge of the change. We are experiencing lots of changes, and a lot of changes. And so in that, one of the things that we want to do is encourage curiosity among ourselves, as well as the people we're working with, and our families and our friends, is encourage that curiosity as we pay attention and try to really understand the challenge of the change. Staying with the discussion until you really understand. Clarifying the challenge of the change. When I prepared for this, and the resources that I highlight, two of my favorites are Brené Brown and Stephen Covey, and they both have books and resources that have informed a lot of this that I'm providing to you today. But they both really emphasized the fact that we often don't get to a real problem identification. We don't listen long enough and pay attention long enough to know what the real challenge is, what the real problem is. We rush to solutions. We like, okay, that's what it is. Okay, cool. Let's fix it real fast. And we often end up with partial fixes and not really a good fix because we've not really understood the problem and the challenge. And so my challenge to you all in the midst of this challenge, in the change, is to really stay the course and try to clarify and get to know that. Here's a few questions that can be helpful in that. And again, these are not by any means earth-shattering questions, but I really think they can be helpful as we are working with partners to do this. The first question being, what are some specific ways that I can support you? The question that I asked my partner, that was a simple question, but it was really powerful in helping her with the change that was going on with her. Another question, would you please say more about this? Or tell me more. I'm attempting this with my daughter who's 3 and refusing to go to the bathroom and the toilet, our potty training adventures. So I'm trying to understand why. Tell me more. So I'm practicing. This could work with your toddler. This could work with your partners, with your spouses, with your colleagues, all kinds of things. These questions can really be helpful in us paying attention and understanding. I'm wondering could be another start. Help me understand. Walk me through. How is this change impacting you? And then sometimes if we've had a conversation, we may need to say, let's take a break so we can think and reflect and then come back together. Sometimes if we're just struggling to understand, we just need to pause and reflect and think. As I've heard people say, even today in some of my earlier meetings, I have COVID brain. I'm sorry, it's not really all coming together at the same time. And that is, legitimate. We sometimes just need to take a break. So my biggest takeaway in this section, and then we're going to have a little bit of Q&A and discussion. If we are going to support our partners in adapting to change, we have to pay attention, listen without having a response, and seek to understand their perspectives on challenges related to the changes. So now, I know you guys can't necessarily unmute yourselves, but I would love to hear from you in the chat. What are some recent examples where you've practiced really listening and trying to understand someone? Is there something y'all can chat about? I know this is probably best suited when we can unmute everybody. I don't know if we can do that for a moment and then people can mute themselves. That's probably too dangerous with this many people. But any thoughts on examples that you have where you have recently listened and really tried to understand? Ah, yep. A friend's mother passing away with COVID. Yes. It's a really good example and really important to really try to understand. Any other examples where you've been practicing this? I'll bring up another question that might be easier. You can answer either one. Oh, good, 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 good. We got lots of stuff coming. I know. Monthly calls to find out the needs of the community. Smoke-free initiative in Shreveport, listening to policymakers and understanding the rationale. Yes, I heard about the Shreveport stuff and I'm just going, no, with you. But yeah, trying to understand is going to be helpful to be able to come together. Meeting with a physician to discuss why he didn't feel the need to screen for social determinants of health during the COVID. Yeah. Sometimes when we disagree with people, it can be particularly hard to put on that stance of listening and trying to understand, because you're like, I'm never going to understand you. You're kind of in that frame, but boy, it's helpful if you're going to really move forward and work in a relationship. Mentoring, paraphrasing what you're hearing. Yes. And a new job and acclimating partners. Feedback after an online meeting. Absolutely. Speaking of, there will be one after this, so please take it. A brief evaluation. And yes, this is really good. Allowing everybody to speak. Excellent. So what are some questions that have worked well for you all to better understand others? Have you used some of those that I mentioned in the last slide? Or are there others that have worked for you that you can share with the rest of the group? Open-ended questions. Good. How did you come to that decision? Tell me about that. Wonderful. Yep, the tell me more. Yeah, and being specific with the questions. Yeah, that sounds like a problem. What's the problem? That's good. Kind of diving in deep. Excellent. Yeah, sometimes, it's easy for us to sometimes speak in the abstract. I don't know about you guys, but I get into conversations and people are like, oh, this is bad. This is real bad. And we should really do something about it. And, it's like, okay, so what are we going to do? Like here, this or this, let's kind of start moving in a direction to understand. So specifics questions are great. Being patient. Yes. And giving time to answer that white space. And yeah. Do you feel heard? Excellent. Repeating the other person's statement. And yeah, the okay with silence. Woo, good stuff. You guys are on it. You guys are on it. So any other questions around this paying attention component? We have a couple more that we'll dive into next. Tell me where your heart is. Oh, that's great. Yeah, very trust building conversations. I just got some new resources. We Connect cards. I don't know if you guys have heard of those at all. But they kind of pose some questions. So I'll send a link to John to perhaps share, might be a nice resource for you guys in helping with some of those questions and connection. Yeah, this is good. Anything else on this aspect for now? Oh, yeah. Asking for an experience that led you to that thought. That's good, Courtney. Well, thank you guys. I'm excited to have the engagement. I know it's late, and so I'm honored for your engagement right now and paying attention. You guys are on it. Maybe because my topic was paying attention for this one. Okay. The next piece we're going to dive into is showing empathy. And it's very connected to the paying attention piece, but we're going to go into showing empathy. So the last webinar we did, I briefly talked about the concept of emotional intelligence and how social awareness and, self-awareness and self-management are kind of the foundation. The next piece of that tends to be social awareness, which the hallmark of that is empathy. So we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like and how to practice that. So next, I'm going to unplug my speaker so you guys can hopefully hear. I start this, give me a thumbs up if you can in the reactions that you can hear me. So here I'm starting it now.
So what is empathy, and why is it very different than sympathy? Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant, and came up with 4 qualities of empathy. Perspective taking, the ability to take the perspective of another person or recognize their perspective as their truth. Staying out of judgment, not easy when you enjoy it as much as most of us do. Recognizing emotion in other people and then communicating that. Empathy is feeling with people. And to me, I always think of empathy as this kind of sacred space when someone's kind of in a deep hole and they shout out from the bottom and they say, I'm stuck, it's dark, I'm overwhelmed. And then we look and we say, hey, you climb down. I know what it's like down here, and you're not alone. Sympathy is, ooh, it's bad, no, you want a sandwich? Empathy is a choice, and it's a vulnerable choice, because in order to connect with you, I have to connect with something in myself that knows that feeling. Rarely, if ever, does an empathic response begin with at least. Yeah. And we do it all the time, because you know what? Someone just shared something with us that's incredibly painful, and we're trying to silver lining it. I don't think that's a verb, but I'm using it as one. We're trying to put the silver lining around it. So I had a miscarriage. At least you know you can get pregnant. I think my marriage is falling apart. At least you have a marriage. John's getting kicked out of school. At least Sarah is an A student. But one of the things we do sometimes in the face of very difficult conversations is we try to make things better. If I share something with you that's very difficult, I'd rather you say, I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me. Because the truth is, rarely can a response make something better. What makes something better is connection.
So how many of you guys, as you look at this video, what connected with you, and have you seen it before? Please chime in if you would. This is Brené Brown. Yes. Kind of what was your takeaway? And we'll kind of dive in. I miss hugs. Yes, me too. Me too. You know what? The last meeting that I was on before this, literally we were in tears as a group, and it was like, we need hugs, like we need to be able to hug each other. Yeah, that's a good word. Anything else that you got from the video? And the link is in your worksheet as well. Yeah, the painting with the silver lining aspect. Whew. No kidding. The good perspective. Yeah. Yep. This is very good. Thank you guys for kind of chiming in. We'll carry on with this. And again, some good resources. I've already said it a bajillion times, but Brené Brown's work is so powerful and really applicable to our work as we work in communities and coalitions. Yes, you know what, Renee? Stay tuned on that. I've got a vision to write something like that. I've got a story here in a moment, but yeah, what not to say or what to say. That's very important, very important. So the piece of the video that stuck with me is that last quote, "I don't even know what to say right now. I'm just so glad you told me," I think is a really powerful thing to say, because we don't know what to say and we usually don't have the words to say. If folks are experiencing major changes and major losses and major struggles, words are not going to be adequate ever, but being able to say that and show empathy is what's really powerful. So what is empathy? And we kind of saw it in action with the video, but it's really connecting to the emotions of another person's experience. It's not necessarily connecting to that actual experience, but connecting to the emotions of that other person's experience. And it's also courageously choosing to be with someone in their darkness, not giving advice or fixing. So a very personal story that relates to one of those quotes is a little over 5 years ago, my first daughter, Clara Annalise, died in my womb. I was 27 weeks pregnant and just, heartbroken. We have a little girl, Ruby, who's our rainbow baby, but Clara was our first. And in that place of darkness, I just was struggling. I was like, okay, what do I do with this? And how can I show love? But, people walked alongside us. We had people who experienced similar grief, other grief, but the empathy piece was the most powerful piece, when people didn't try to fix anything and they just sat with us and said, wow, this is hard. I don't have any words, but I'm going to be with you. And about a year ago, one of my close college girlfriends lost her husband, just really kind of unexpectedly, a swift cancer kind of that happened. And on the year anniversary of his death, she wanted to have lunch with me. I was like, are you sure? I mean, this is a big day, the anniversary. And she said, yes. She said, because you're able to help carry my grief with me, because you show empathy. And because I was walked through not her story, but something that had similar emotions and grief and loss, I was able to walk with her. And one of the visions I have is actually to write a book that says, here's what's helpful and here's what's not. So stay tuned on that. Maybe that I needed to hear that once again to write that down. But empathy is really connecting to the emotions. We don't have to completely understand and be through that experience to be able to show empathy to others and just to be there. So what gets in the way of our empathy? Sometimes sympathy. And as those who live in the South, bless your heart is used way too many times. And that's a sympathy statement oftentimes, bless your heart, rather than really sitting with somebody. So that can be a barrier. Sometimes it puts up a wall and it says, I don't really want to dive into that. That sounds painful and complicated. Bless your heart. The other piece is shame, and there's aspects of shame, which we won't go into depth, but again, Brené Brown does some really good stuff. The thoughts of ourselves, well, I'm never good enough, or who do you think you are, or something may be wrong with me, rather than I did something wrong. This can get in the way of empathy to others, both for ourselves and for others. They may have shame that prevents that. Other empathies being fear, looking wrong, saying something wrong, or being wrong. And that's a fear that it was just brought up earlier today that we're experiencing a lot of. I know as something, and Brené Brown said this, that again, I'm really challenged by. She said that when we choose comfort over courage, that's the epitome of privilege. And it's like, wow, what a powerful statement, and what an important thing to say. I may be afraid, I don't know what to say, with all the racism that's elevated and the realization of all that's going on. I might say something wrong, or I might be wrong, or I don't understand. But if I do that, then I'm letting fear dominate, and I'm preventing empathy and really just asking or trying to understand or looking at that. So fear can be that barrier, but we don't want to let that win out. Privilege, and I guess I was kind of choosing that. That can be a barrier to empathy, choosing our own comfort over hard conversations. Other barriers, perfectionism, which kind of leads into some of those things too. Sometimes we get stuck and we get defined by our disappointments and failures, rather than learning and growing and saying we're all learning and growing. We're not going to be perfect. Fixing, the at least statement. I can tell you just one thing, and the precursor to the book that may be written. She is so right on the at least statement. That is such a barrier to empathy. If we start a sentence with at least, it's starting to diminish what's important to somebody else. And when folks are going through difficult times and difficult changes, just scratch at least from your vocabulary, and you'll be able to provide some additional support to somebody. So how do we build our empathy skills? Well, we practice understanding the perspective of others, and we honor other people's perspectives as truth, even if they're different than ours. That's their truth, and how that can be very powerful. Avoiding judgment, as Brené Brown said, we often judge people in areas that we are most susceptible to. And you guys may have known that, or you may get the most frustrated by people who do something that you do that drives you nuts. And so we tend to judge in those places. But when we avoid judgment, we're able to build some of our empathy skills. Developing emotional literacy. I had never really thought about emotional literacy as a skill, but it really is. And one of the things we've talked about emotional intelligence, but emotional literacy, how do we understand emotions? And again, I've mentioned I do have a 3-year-old, and she will look at our faces and she'll be like, "Mommy, why are you angry?" Or if I'm crying, she's like, "Why are you sad? Why are you happy?" You know, developing an emotional literacy and ability to say what's going on is important. You know, in order to communicate with one another. Brené talks about how there's like 30 to 40 different emotions that we can become literate of. That's a lot, you know, becoming literate of what's going on and understanding another person's emotions. Also, communicating your understanding of that person's emotions. And you guys mentioned that in the chat, what you were doing with paying attention. So the biggest takeaway for this one is, in order to connect with our partners as they adapt to change, we must connect with them and the emotions connected to their experiences. Instead of trying to fix the situation, we need to sit with them, listen to them, and show that we care. And I will say that for the coalition work that I've done for more than 17 years, I've found that the best colleagues and relationships are the ones who become your friends. And that's where the trust is built. And that's where the emotional connection is. And kind of connecting back to the story of Clara, I would say, goodness, I can't even count the number of people who I worked in a coalition with, who sent us a card, who called us, who said, you know, "We're with you." This didn't have to do with the work we were doing, but they cared about me as a person. And this is really powerful when you're working with coalitions, to care about people as a person and showing empathy in that place. So some questions for this. And I'll kind of start with the first one. What barriers to empathy have you guys seen or experienced over the past few months? And that could be personal or just things that you've observed as you've been working with folks. What barriers to empathy have you guys seen? That's good. Religious cultural beliefs. Just pray about it. Whew. Yes. That's a great example. That's definitely a barrier. People are too self-absorbed. Yep. Sometimes getting too focused on the work, we forget that people have personal challenges. Yeah. Stress. Ooh, instant messaging and texting. Boy, that's really good. That really can get in the way. And it also can get in the way of really understanding. Yes. Not acknowledging someone else's experience is different than their own. That's really good. Feeling we have to have all the answers. Yeah, we don't. We just need to listen. Feeling like problems are contagious and projecting their own fears. Yeah, that's really good too. Very good. Lots of echoing of Jamie's. Yeah. There's this tendency in sympathy, or when we're struggling, is to say, "Oh yeah, I know about that. I know what that means. I know what that's like." But you don't. I mean, even some similar piece is different. And when you experience great loss, you realize that. That's good. Listening fatigue. Yes. Yep. Totally. Listening fatigue is a good one. we've been doing a lot of listening sometimes, and we're just tired. And I just read a blog yesterday on, it was related to marriage and relationships, and kind of saying, hey, be careful of your emotional kind of reserve, if you will, what you have, that you don't give all of your emotional capacity and reserve to everyone else, that you miss out on your family. And I think for work like you guys are doing and that we're doing, when we're helping people, that can happen. So sometimes, even though we want to listen, we can't always be the one to listen at that time, and maybe we need to step away or not answer the phone call for that time, and protect some of that too. We can show empathy, but it can be exhausting, and it's okay to pause on that. Yes, our own cups are very full. Not have enough to pour into others. So thinking about showing empathy to yourself, and what do you need? Yeah, that's great. That can get in the way of our own empathy when we are over full. We're just exhausted. Good examples. So the next question I have, what are some examples of empathy that you've seen or experienced over the past few months? Or maybe ways that people have shown you empathy. Yep, just showing someone you care, for sure. Checking in. Yeah. Allowing employees to work from home, to care for children, absolutely. Coworkers acknowledging the effects of racism. Telling them that you can always call. Yeah, others' needs may be different from our own. Great. Two community partners losing their moms, and that you're praying for them and there to help. Yeah, saying you care. Work friends sharing personal cell phone number to call. Great examples. You guys are doing it, living it, experiencing it. Thank you for sharing these. Any other questions or discussions? We've got one more section. I know we're like 10 minutes out, so I want to make sure you're out on time, because goodness, you've been in this for a while today. Yeah. Thank you, Tracy, for sharing. We are sorry for your loss. Having someone cry on the phone with you, and friends to help care for mental health. Absolutely. Just being with somebody, for sure. Thank you for those examples. And reaching out to friends that you haven't connected with to check on them. Absolutely. Good word. Thank you all. Okay, so the last piece that kind of connects in this space of really helping our partners adapt to change is building trust. So working better together involves building trust. It involves paying attention, showing empathy, and this kind of builds on that. And it's all very connected, so it's not always separate. So the next piece here is the concept of an emotional bank account. How many folks are familiar with this? This is a Covey statement initially. Have you guys heard of emotional bank account before? Just type in if you have. A few of you have. Yeah. Excellent. So basically, it helps us know the amount of trust in a relationship. And the way it works is deposits are high trust, withdrawals are low trust. And the idea of a deposit, and we'll kind of go into deep depth here, are things like being courteous, to being kind, honest, keeping your commitments, those kind of things. The withdrawals and the low trust are disrespect, or cutting you off, or overreacting, or ignoring you, or staying silent. So then when we look at how do we deposit things, and that I'll go into depth here, is that really seeking to understand somebody helps with the deposits. Practicing empathy helps with the deposits. The showing the little acts of kindness and courtesy helps with deposits. And an example I've got the link in your worksheet is the marble jar analogy with Brené Brown. And basically, she talks about how her third grade daughter came home one day and was just in tears. And she had shared something with some friends that got to everybody in the class, and everybody was laughing at her. And her teacher had a marble jar that when the class collectively does good things, they put marbles in it. And when they don't, they take marbles out. And they ended up emptying the marble jar that day. And the example here is we kind of all have marble jars, and others do as well. So as we put little marbles in by showing acts of kindness, we're adding to the marble jar. And when somebody fills up the marble jar for you, you know you can trust them and you can share those things with them. And so it's those little things that go a long way in building those emotional bank account deposits. Others, keeping commitments and promises, doing what you say you're going to do, clarifying expectations. One of my favorite quotes from her: clear is kind, unclear is unkind. Whew, this is big. And this is tough. If you guys have any similarities to me, that we grew up in a place where being nice is the answer. And I love kind of the end of no more public health nice. Let's be clear about what's going on. Unclear is unkind. So an important piece there. Other deposits: showing integrity, choosing courage over comfort, sincerely apologizing when you make a withdrawal. And in that place, here's some examples of sincere apologies that you could say or start out with. I was wrong. That, and be specific, was unkind of me. I was disrespectful when. I embarrassed you when, and I apologize. Very powerful to put those deposits back in and those marbles back in the jar. So as we think about withdrawals, or sometimes the opposite of some of these, but one of those, and you guys mentioned here, is making things all about you is definitely a way to withdraw from take withdrawals from the bank account or the marble jar. Practicing sympathy, always going to bless your heart instead of just sitting and listening. Good example. Yeah. Deliver more than you promise, but never promise more than you deliver. That's a good example of a deposit. Thank you. Other withdrawals: being disrespectful and dismissive, not following through with commitments and promises, being unclear, choosing to be silent when you could speak up, betraying another person's confidence, refusing to apologize, holding a grudge, all withdrawals. And these are on your worksheet as well. So here's a few examples. And you guys may already do this. And again, I'll move through these, but then I want to hear from you as well the last few minutes. Writing those personal notes goes a long way. A sympathy note, a thank you note, just a note to check in. Checking in with your partners. When you know there's a special event or significant change or something major going on, checking in is powerful. You guys have already talked about that. Recognizing specific contributions of your partners and from your partners. Not always just saying, hey, you're the best. But boy, when you facilitated that meeting, it really brought everybody together in a positive way. Thank you for doing that. Other examples: providing space for your coalition members to share and reflect. Being considerate. Being courageously curious. Asking those questions with courage. Following through with what you say you will do. Practice. So yeah, again, sitting with your partners during difficult change without providing advice or trying to fix. And this can happen in all areas of life too. This can be good practice in your family life too. Working together to support one another's work. And keep listening, learning, trying new things in order to meet community needs. Okay, so our biggest takeaway here is, in order to support our partners in adapting to change and working better together, we have to continually build trust through our words and our actions. So, can you guys give me in the last few minutes some recent examples of trust deposits in your work with coalitions? The pet calendar. That's a great idea. And then thinking about some withdrawals, and I'll let you guys keep thinking on that. I want to make sure we're ending with some time. Quick wins, brainstorming to build trust. Excellent. All really good stuff. Okay, so I want you guys, keeping things in confidence. I love that you had a pet calendar. That should be an example for so many others. Yes, deposit, checking on each other, information or sharing. So I want you guys to take that worksheet and kind of think about additional ways. It sounds like you're already doing it. Allowing a subcommittee to work autonomously. Yeah, this is so good. So good. Yeah, SWOT analysis. Okay, so resources and recommendations. On the worksheet that I give you guys, there's an additional worksheet. It's real brief on emotional intelligence and coalition building. I encourage you guys to download that as a resource. I'd love for you guys to have that as a reference as well. Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Again, I have a link in that worksheet. Highly recommend it. If you haven't read it yet, it is a good read. And it sounds like Evicted is also a good read. I caught the end of that, so I'll add that to my list. Really, really good. And 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. If you haven't read it, now's the time. If you have read it, it's a great time to reread it. So yes, these are some additional resources recommendations. And then my contact information. My website is here. And again, that's on your worksheet. My email. I'm also on Facebook providing this kind of support. I do a weekly Facebook Live every Friday at 11:30, highlighting kind of a topic that I blog about on Thursdays. So the worksheet was emailed to you, and if maybe somebody could drop it in the chat one more time, that would be great. So folks, that it's been a long time ago in the chat, so I'm not sure how to drop it in the chat, but if somebody could drop that in, there you go. If you haven't yet downloaded it there, it should also be in your email. And yes, please take it. Literally, it'll probably take you 3 minutes, but would love your feedback on how this was helpful. Leader in Me for school-based principals. That's good. Excellent. All right. Any last parting words? Thank you guys for being here and for hanging in till the end.
Jennifer, thank you so much. That was great. Again, guys, for anybody that wants to see this training that missed it, if you've got any partners that had to bail or, that might want to see it, we did record this and we're going to be throwing it up on the website, and we'll email out the link as well. But Jennifer, thank you so much. This has been so good.
You're welcome. Thank you for the opportunity. I've enjoyed being with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank everybody else for hanging in here. I know it's been a long time of sitting down. This was a long Zoom meeting, and we still clung on to like the majority of the people that joined in. So thanks everybody for joining us. This was a great summit, great meeting. Thanks again to our planning team and our sponsor, Louisiana Healthcare Connections. And we'll see you around.
Thanks all.